Improve your vocabulary, 3 levels English.
In 1900, the U.S. made a big decision with something called the Gold Standard Act. This was a special rule that said the value of our money, like the dollars we use, would be based on a certain amount of gold. Think of it like saying that every dollar bill is worth a tiny piece of gold. This was a big deal because it made people here and in other countries trust our money more, knowing it was worth something real. The Gold Standard Act was like a promise that if you had a dollar, it was as good as having a little gold. They decided that 1 ounce of gold would be the same as $20.67. This helped make buying and selling things between people and countries smoother and more reliable because everyone knew exactly what their money was worth in gold. Because of this gold rule, the U.S. became a stronger player in the world's money game. Our money being tied to gold made it more stable, which was great for business and helped our economy grow. People and countries were more willing to trade with us and invest in our country. But like most things, this gold rule had its downsides. Since there's only so much gold out there, it was hard to make more money when we needed it. If there wasn't enough gold, we couldn't have enough money for everything we needed to do, like buying things or paying people. This could make prices go up and down a lot, which isn't good for people trying to plan their spending or businesses trying to make plans. Things got really tough during the Great Depression in the 1930s, a time when lots of people didn't have jobs and businesses were struggling. The gold rule made it hard for the government to help fix these problems. So, President Roosevelt decided it was time to start moving away from this gold rule in 1933. Later on, President Nixon made it official, and we stopped using the gold rule for our money in 1971. Looking back, the Gold Standard Act was a big chapter in our money story. It taught us a lot about how to keep our money stable and trustworthy, but also showed us the challenges of tying our money too closely to something like gold. These lessons help us think about how to handle our money today, showing us that sometimes we need to be ready to try new ideas to keep up with a changing world.
In 1900, the United States took a major step in its economic history by enacting the Gold Standard Act. This important law established the gold standard, which meant that the value of U.S. money was officially tied to a specific amount of gold. This move was aimed at making the dollar more stable and trustworthy, both within the country and internationally. The core idea of the Gold Standard Act was to link the U.S. dollar directly to gold, setting the price of gold at $20.67 per ounce. This established a steady exchange rate between gold and the dollar, making the U.S. currency more reliable for buying and selling things at home and abroad. The act also encouraged the use of gold-backed money while putting limits on silver, leading to a more consistent and less unpredictable financial system. Adopting the gold standard had a big impact on the U.S. financial system, greatly improving its stability. By tying the dollar to gold, the U.S. strengthened its position in the world economy. The gold standard became a well-recognized standard for value, boosting international trade and investment. This stability helped the U.S. economy grow and increased its role in global financial markets. However, the gold standard also brought challenges, especially because it depended on the limited amount of gold available. If the amount of gold changed, it could affect how much money was in circulation, possibly causing inflation or deflation. This lack of flexibility made it hard for the government to adjust its economic policies in response to changing economic conditions. These issues became more evident during tough economic times when it was crucial to have more control over monetary policy. The gold standard's weaknesses became particularly clear during the Great Depression in the 1930s, a time of great economic hardship. The limitations of the gold standard made it difficult for the U.S. government to take effective action to improve the economy, leading many to question whether the gold standard was still a good foundation for monetary policy. In response, President Franklin D. Roosevelt started to move away from the gold standard in 1933, a change that was completed by President Richard Nixon in 1971, ending the U.S.'s use of the gold standard. Looking back, the Gold Standard Act of 1900 is seen as a key moment in U.S. economic policy. It represents the country's effort to create a stable and respected currency through the gold standard. While the gold standard played an important part in the U.S. economy for a while, the lessons learned from its challenges have helped us understand more about monetary policy and the changing nature of economic systems. These lessons are still valuable today as we discuss monetary policy and financial regulation, highlighting the need to be flexible and innovative in the face of a constantly changing global economy.
The Gold Standard Act of 1900 was a watershed moment in American economic history, definitively instituting the gold standard as the bedrock of the U.S. monetary system. This pivotal legislation underscored a commitment to the stabilization of the U.S. currency's value by tethering it to a specified amount of gold, thus enhancing the dollar's trustworthiness both domestically and abroad. Central to the Gold Standard Act was the concept of fixing the U.S. dollar's value to a precise quantity of gold, with the statute establishing the price of gold at $20.67 per ounce. This established rate between gold and the dollar aimed to guarantee the U.S. currency's steadiness and reliability, rendering it a solid basis for transactions within the nation and in international trade. Additionally, the act encouraged the production of gold-backed currency while setting restrictions on silver usage, striving for a more coherent and stable financial system. The enactment of the gold standard had significant repercussions for the American financial architecture, markedly improving its stability and coherence. By linking the dollar to gold, America strengthened its stature in the global economy. The gold standard acted as a globally acknowledged standard of value, fostering international commerce and investment. This era of stability spurred economic expansion and heightened America's role in global financial markets. However, the gold standard also introduced limitations and vulnerabilities to the U.S. economy, notably its dependence on the limited gold supply. Variations in gold availability could precipitate shifts in the money supply, potentially inciting inflation or deflation. Such inflexibility constrained governmental capacity to adjust monetary policies in response to economic shifts and crises. The gold standard's limitations became especially pronounced during economic downturns, highlighting the critical need for monetary adaptability. The Great Depression of the 1930s, characterized by profound economic turmoil, brought the gold standard's drawbacks into sharp relief. The system's rigidities impeded the U.S. government's ability to enact effective measures to mitigate the economic slump, prompting a reevaluation of the gold standard's suitability as the cornerstone of monetary policy. In reaction, President Franklin D. Roosevelt initiated a departure from the gold standard in 1933, a move conclusively effected by President Richard Nixon in 1971, thereby discontinuing America's commitment to a gold-based monetary framework. Reflecting on the Gold Standard Act of 1900, it emerges as a critical juncture in the evolution of U.S. economic policy, encapsulating the nation's endeavor to cultivate monetary stability and global trust through the gold standard. While the system significantly influenced the American financial landscape, the challenges it posed offer profound insights into monetary policy's intricacies and the fluid nature of economic systems. These historical experiences continue to shape current monetary policy and financial regulatory debates, emphasizing the need for flexibility and innovation in an increasingly dynamic global economic arena. Watershed, a critical turning point. The word originally refers to a ridge of land separating waters flowing to different rivers, basins, or seas. Its metaphorical use in describing pivotal moments in history or life derives from this dividing line, indicating a significant change. Bedrock, the fundamental principles on which something is based. Originally a geological term referring to the solid rock underlying loose deposits such as soil, it is often used metaphorically to describe the foundation of an idea, institution, or other constructs. Pivotal, of crucial importance in relation to the development or success of something else. The word comes from pivot, which means a central point on which something turns or oscillates. Legislation, laws considered collectively. It derives from the Latin legis latio, meaning proposing, lating, a law, lex. Tethering, to tie with a rope or chain so as to restrict movement. The term comes from the Old Norse tjotter, a rope or chain used to tie animals. Trustworthiness, the ability to be relied on as honest or truthful, derives from the Old Norse word traust, meaning confidence, trust. Statute, a written law passed by a legislative body. It originates from the Old French statute, which means a setting in place, and from the Latin statutum, something established. Ounce, a unit of weight. The word comes from the Old English yints, based on the Latin uncia, which was 1/12 of a Roman pound or libra. Currency, the system of money in general use in a particular country. The term comes from the medieval Latin currentia, meaning a flow, coherent, logical, and consistent, originally from Latin coharere, meaning to stick together. Repercussions, unintended consequences of an event or action, especially unwelcome ones. The term comes from the Latin repercussus, past participle of repercutera, meaning to drive back or beat back. Vulnerabilities, the state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed. It comes from the Latin vulnerare, meaning to wound. Inflexibility, the quality of being too unchangeable or rigid, derives from Latin in, not, and flexibilis, bendable. Mitigate, to make less severe, serious, or painful, comes from the Latin mitigare, meaning to soften, make tender. Cornerstone, an important quality or feature on which a particular thing depends or is based. Historically, a cornerstone was the first stone set in the construction of a masonry foundation, important since all other stones were set in reference to this stone, thus determining the position of the entire structure. Fluidity, the ability to flow easily, smooth elegance or grace, comes from the Latin fluidus, meaning flowing fluid.